into the last of the structures, the internal structures that we're going to learn about. So in chapter 6, we're going to look at person-based structures. So recall that in the last few weeks, we've been talking about job-based structures. And so now we're going to talk about person-based structures. And also remember that I told you that most organizations have both structures. You don't usually choose either or some jobs will be under one structure and other jobs might be in another structure. And why do we have both of these structures then, especially if organizations are using both? Why can't we just pick one? Well, what happened is when workplaces and organizations started systematically kind of recording information about the jobs they had, this is more kind of in the mid 20th century, 1950s, 60s, and 70s. A lot of the work that employees did at that time was transactional work, even in office places or office spaces, where a lot of that work was very routine. So you did a lot of the same things over and over. And so it was very easy to record the kinds of things that people did in jobs because those jobs didn't change very often. And you could group the tasks that people did into jobs that made very good sense because it was routine work that was not going to change very quickly over time. However, I would say in the 70s, it starts changing a lot. And I would say now, I mean, you see this constantly for a lot of the jobs that you guys intern in or work in right now or will be working in when you graduate, that a lot of what employees do now is tacit work or what we call complex work, where there's not necessarily a routine or some kind of standard operating procedure for doing that work. And a lot of that work, it might be work that no one's ever done before that requires a lot of knowledge, skills, and abilities that are very specific to that task, but you may or may not need again in other tasks. And sometimes, and for a lot of you, the reason I think that most of your work will be tacit is part of the idea of getting a college degree is to learn a lot of skills that will help you become a lifelong learner to do a lot of this complex work that we actually that doesn't exist yet, or that we need to do because it has a lot of moving parts and we have to work in teams. So we have both of these because these kinds of jobs both still exist. Job-based processes, and especially when we did them in the mid 20th century, allowed us to break up jobs into like these tasks that needed to be done. And then we could repackage them into new jobs if we wanted to put different kinds of tasks together, or as jobs were changing, to add new tasks into those job descriptions. Well, now we live in a world where a lot of us are going to be doing work that doesn't yet exist or that requires something completely new. And we often have to work in teams because it's really complex work. So this requires that people are continuously learning, that they're improving their skills and knowledge and abilities, and that they're very flexible to work on lots of different projects at the same time, and a lot of different projects that require this kind of tacit knowledge. Because of this, you want to keep your employees motivated to do this continuous learning, and that's where the person-based processes can really support this need because people are getting paid for the knowledge they're learning and the abilities and skills they're developing, not necessarily just the work that is in the job description that they were hired to do, especially if that work has changed very quickly or changed over the time that they've been in that job. So let's go through the first kind of person-based structure that's in the chapter of the two. This first one are skill plans. Skill-based pay has existed in manufacturing for some time. And you can think about this as pay that's really based on the skills that people have. And you're going to want to use this in a workplace where there's lots of different skills that people need to do different tasks or to do what would be considered different jobs. And so the reason this works really well in manufacturing is they have lots of, if you think of like a factory, for example, building a car, there's going to be lots of different groups of people or even single individuals who are doing different parts of that car. They're working on different parts, but they also are requiring different skills to work on those parts. So some people could be working with screwdrivers and putting screws into doors, for example. Other people could be soldering some metal together. Other people could be putting an engine into a computer and getting diagnostics and that sort of thing. There's lots of different tasks involved that require lots of different skills. So in a manufacturing environment, you have people who are working in these teams. Each team member may have some different skills, but they could learn each of the skills that they each need for the different parts of the process that they need to do, which would allow them to then be flexible so that you can switch people out for different parts of the tasks that that team has to do. That helps people be deployed in a better way that matches the workflow, especially if you think about people taking vacation or having parental leave or having accidents where they're going to be out of work for some time. You can replace the person who's going to be out of work for a temporary amount of time with someone else who has those same skills so that you don't have an interruption in your workflow. And that then helps people avoid either bottlenecks where, say, you have, 10 things that people have to do, and someone who does the fourth thing is gone. If no one knows how to do that job, people from 1 through 3 can keep working, but whatever they're making isn't going to it won't be processed into anything new in that fourth step because there's no one there to do it. And then the people in steps 5 through 10 will have nothing to do because there's no one to process the materials in step 4. And so then you have a lot of people who are standing around idle. So in skill-based structures, we link our pay to the depth and breadth of the skills that people have and the abilities and knowledge that they're acquiring that's relevant to their work. So it's not just any skills, it's the ones that will be useful in their job or in the work or in the place that they work. You get paid for all the skills that you have certified as an individual when you're an employee, whether you actually have to use those skills at work or not. And then the wages then are attached to the person and the number of skills that they have and not necessarily the job that they were hired to do. So we have 2 different kinds of skill-based plans. The first is a specialist plan. So this is really looking at the depth of a skill. And this is really good for employees who are going to be working in a job for some time. They're not necessarily working in a team or in a team of people that might have different skills where they could be switching out using different skills each day. These are people who probably have different skills, but they use them all in the same job over some time. So the example in our book that's a really good example of this, and that's something that you all are probably very familiar with, is teaching. Especially K through 12 teaching is very much this way, where you have people who are going to be in these jobs for some years, and they may even be teaching the same grade or the same subject year after year, but theoretically, the education they've gotten, especially if they get advanced degrees like a master's degree or a PhD, or they get some additional certifications like those working with non-native English speakers or special education students, can help them work with more students and can help them provide the resources to those students that they need. You also can think about if you stay in a job for many, many years, that experience is going to help you to deal with issues that are going on in the classroom, but theoretically should help you become a better teacher because you understand the material and what you're doing in your job much better. And so the presumption under the specialist skill plan is that that knowledge translates into, in the teaching realm, higher teaching effectiveness. Whether that actually does or not is a different question, but theoretically, that education and experience should do that. In the multi-skill or generalist skill plan, which is kind of what this factory was in the last slide, that's more about breadth. So how many different skills do you know? And this is really useful when you're working in teams where people each have a different skill, and then you can interchange different employees out into the different parts of this team. Pay increases then come with certifying new skills rather than with new job assignments. And then once an employee has a certification, they are then eligible to work in the jobs that require that certification. And that's why you can replace members in a team if someone is not going to be there, to make sure that the flow in that team, the workflow in that team continues. Employee responsibilities, however, in this kind of environment can change very quickly over time, over a short period of time, because you have lots of different skills, and those skills could also be changing over time because of technology, because of new knowledge, and that sort of thing. So what is the purpose of skill-based structures? We have 4 that really are a reason that a lot of organizations use these. Skills, when we use them for a skills-based plan, have to be related to the organization's objectives and strategies. You can't just be paying for any skills because you just don't have enough money for that. So organizations need to pick skills that are related to their strategies. But just like we've learned in other weeks, if you change your organizational strategy, you have to change the skills that you're paying for then, because the skills that you used to pay for may not actually align with that strategy if you change it. It helps match people with workflows we just talked about. Employees actually like skills-based plans because they have the potential to earn a lot of pay. And in fact, they control a lot of that if they get to choose the training that they go to, and if they get to choose when they do the certification for that. But sometimes, or in a lot of workplaces, especially when the organization or the employer is providing the training, they might have limited spots for the training and also for the certification, not only because they just may have like resource constraints, like they don't have a very large classroom to do these in, but also you can't have all of your employees in a workflow all at training in one day without some interruption to that workflow. So if managers and leaders get to choose who gets this training, you may end up with some favoritism and bias in the process, because they may be choosing people that they think have the most leadership potential, which may or may not actually be about their leadership and more about the relationship they have with the managers that get to choose who goes to that training. Person-based plans are also helpful because they can clarify the standards and behavioral expectations for employees, especially because it tells employees exactly what skills are going to be valued in this workplace and gives them a way to learn those skills. So it's much clearer than like a job-based plan where you might have tasks that are part of your job, but once you kind of mastered those tasks, what else are you going to do to go above and beyond that job description? A skill-based plan tells you you can go learn more skills and get certified in new skills. So how do you do this? You're going to have to start with a skill analysis. This is very similar to a job analysis. And in fact, the job analysis we did 2 chapters ago could actually be the basis for your skill analysis, because in the job analysis, you were asking people in their jobs what tasks they were doing and what skills were needed for those tasks. Well, here you're going to break up, instead of putting those skills together in a job description, you're going to pull them out for the different tasks. And then skills are going to be bundled together in these skill blocks with other similar skills. And then that way, employees, instead of having to go by a job description, they can go by skill block and start working on the skills in that skill block. And then as they're earning those skills, they can get certified and then do those skills in different tasks in the job when needed. So who do we involve? Unlike job analysis, where it's pretty clear to us from research who should be involved and when, there's a lot less uniformity in person-based plans in terms of not only terminology, but how these are implemented and who's involved in them. We know that employees almost always have to be involved in these kinds of plans because they're the ones that know the skills best for the tasks they have to do in their jobs. And in fact, managers may not have those skills because they don't do those jobs. Or if they did do those jobs in the past, the skills have changed so much since they did those jobs that those skills that employees currently have are not the same that they had when they did the job, 10, 20 years ago. So managers and employees usually have to provide information together on defining what the skills are, arranging them into some kind of hierarchy in the sense of either what skills are most valued in this organization, or in the sense that there may be skills that are kind of like base level skills, and they're like the building blocks that you use to learn other skills. You then bundle those skills into skill blocks, and then you make sure that people get certified, showing that they possess those skills once they've done the training for those skills. And you can do certification in lots of different ways. Organizations have traditionally used like peer review, where someone, like a coworker, actually watches someone use the skill. You can, or like at the end of a training, that's the most common way of doing it. You can also have on-the-job demonstrations where someone actually has to use the skill to do the job, which is exactly what you would want in an organization in the sense of that's why they're learning the skill. You can also have tests for certifications, like a paper and pencil test or an online computer test. What's happening for lots of workplaces is they used to allow employees to just do this training and then do the certification when they were done with the training, and that would be whenever the employees were ready to do that. Well, now a lot of organizations are scheduling review points for fixed times of the year, and this is to save money, but also to control the payroll increases that people will get from certifying their skills. So instead of allowing, and let me use a really good example that some of you may actually be familiar with. SHRM certification exam does this exact thing. So instead of signing up to take the HR certification exam from SHRM whenever you want during the year, they have 2 windows available, December to February and May to July. And you have to sign up for one of those windows well in advance, and then you can study for the test up until that window. And then you can schedule your exam for any time in that window that's available at either a testing center or online. Well, this helps SHRM not only for budgeting reasons, because they don't have to be available for that test year round. They only have to have half the year, 6 months of the year available when people are going to be taking the test. But the other 6 months of the year, instead of worrying about testing, they can be developing the next test because they're constantly changing questions or updating them based on new knowledge. So that's an example of how an organization is controlling more of the way that people are getting certified and the whole process by doing that. We do have some other issues though. We have to figure out how do we make sure to show that people are continuing to use those skills or know how to use those skills after some time. So how do we make sure they're recertifying those skills? And then how do we remove certification if someone either doesn't remember how to do the skill because they haven't used it for some time, or if the actual skill becomes completely obsolete in our workplace and we don't need it anymore? How are we going to remove that certification? And what is the process for doing that? But also think about the pay for that employee then. If they learned that skill, it's no longer needed in the workplace. So the research is actually pretty positive about skill-based plans. They're very well accepted among employees because it very much ties the plan, the way that they're going to get paid, to the work that they do, and then how big their paycheck is going to be. So as long as you know these skills, however many you have, this is what your paycheck is going to be. It gives the employee a lot more control over their paycheck because that's really about them learning these skills. But for the employer, this can be really difficult because you could have lots of people who max out or top out on all the skills they could be learning, so they have the maximum pay. But if they're not using those skills in their jobs because it's not needed on a day-to-day basis, you could actually be increasing your labor costs without increasing your productivity. So these plans are generally better for places like manufacturing or factory where not most of the costs aren't necessarily labor costs. So in a factory, a lot of the costs are going to be materials, the technology, the actual like building or buildings that you're doing the manufacturing in, and labor costs are a lot less than say like teaching, where teaching is mostly the people that are involved there, and that's why you end up with different kinds of skill-based plans in these different workplaces because of the labor costs.